My family treated my career like a bad joke for years, laughing every time I mentioned my dreams. They said I'd never make it, that I was wasting my time. But what they didn't know was, behind their sneers, I was quietly building something they couldn't even imagine. Before I tell you what happened next, hit that subscribe button and share this story, because what comes next will blow your mind. It started with me working late nights on a small project no one cared about while my family gathered around boasting about their real jobs. Every dinner was filled with whispers and sneers about how I was stuck in a dead-end job with no future. My own sister told me I was a disappointment, and my father once said I'd never amount to anything. That pain pushed me harder, fueling my silence. Meanwhile, I kept my focus. No one knew that my little side hustle was turning into a full-blown business, one that was quietly catching fire. I stayed out of the spotlight, avoided family events, and saved every penny. The harder they mocked me, the stronger I became. They thought I was broke, but I was building an empire under their noses. Then came the day that changed everything. My phone rang, and on the other end was a voice I never expected. The CEO of a huge company, the very place my family bragged about working. He had heard about my project and wanted to invest millions. Suddenly the family joke wasn't so funny anymore. But I didn't just take the money. I planned my moment to reveal the truth. A moment that would make every insult they ever threw at me look like the biggest mistake of their lives. And trust me, it was just the beginning. They invited me to a big family reunion, the perfect stage for their usual taunts and sneers. I showed up quietly, dressed like the same loser they always saw, but inside, I was ready. The moment my sister smirked and whispered, "Still nothing to show for yourself?" I felt a fire ignite. Dinner started, and the insults flew as usual. My cousin openly mocked my little side project, calling it a joke. The room laughed, and for a moment I played along, pretending to be the same old failure. But then, as dessert was served, I stood up and asked for everyone's attention. I pulled out my phone and showed them a live stream, my company's headquarters, employees bustling, contracts being signed, and most importantly, a huge contract announcement with the CEO who had called me. The room fell silent, jaws dropped. They had no idea I was worth millions. My father's face went pale. The sister who mocked me couldn't speak. And that cousin? His smirk vanished completely. I told them, "All those years you laughed at me, I was building the future you'll never have." The silence was heavy, and then came the shocker. I revealed I held the majority shares of the company that employed most of them. But just when they thought it was over, I dropped the biggest bomb. They weren't just working for me. They were relying on me. And without my approval, none of them would get their next paycheck. That's when the real game began. Their faces twisted with disbelief and anger. Some tried to laugh it off. But deep down, I saw the fear settling in. The same people who had spent years tearing me down now realized I held the power to change their lives, or ruin them. My father, who once called me a failure in front of everyone, stared at me like I was a stranger. My sister, who prided herself on being successful, suddenly looked small and helpless. I told them, "You all thought I was nothing. You celebrated every mistake you imagined I'd make. But I was the one signing the deals, shaking hands with the biggest players in the industry while you wasted time gossiping." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Then I pulled out the final twist. They weren't just employees. Many of them depended on contracts I had quietly secured. Without my signature, their jobs were gone. I had spent years watching them use me as the family joke, while I held the keys to their futures in my hands. The room erupted into chaos. My cousin shouted, "This is impossible! How did you even get this far without us noticing?" I smiled and said, "Because I worked in silence. While you were busy laughing, I was building an empire." Then, looking directly at my father, I added, "You told me I'd be left with nothing. Well, guess who's holding the power now?" The shock wasn't just that I was successful. It was that I had done it all without their support or approval. I was no longer the family joke. I was the one who controlled their fate. And the best part? This was just the beginning. The biggest moves were yet to come, and they had no idea how deep my plans went. As the night ended, I left the reunion knowing my life had changed forever, and they would never underestimate me again. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was just starting. The days after that reunion were electric with tension I hadn't expected. My family's pride was shattered, and they didn't know how to act around me anymore. My phone buzzed nonstop, not with congratulations, but with desperate calls and veiled threats. My sister, who once dismissed me as a failure, suddenly wanted advice. My father, who had been so loud about my supposed uselessness, was now silent, careful, not to say the wrong thing. But I wasn't fooled by their sudden change. Behind their polite facades, I could feel the jealousy simmering. They wanted to know how I did it, how I turned my useless little project into a multi-million-dollar empire. The truth? I never told them everything. I let their imaginations fill in the blanks, fueling their fear and respect in equal measure. Then came the first real test of power. A major supplier called, threatening to cut ties with the company unless I agreed to unfair demands. The same supplier my family had dealt with for years, always bending the rules because of their connections. I refused. Instead, I used my contacts, built over years of silent work, to find a better deal and even a competitor eager to take the supplier's place. When I shared the news with the family, at the next dinner, of course, their faces went white. The supplier who once controlled their work now answered to me. I had flipped the entire game. But the best part? I kept it simple. No flashy announcements, just quiet confidence and undeniable results. They started realizing that I wasn't just lucky or in the right place at the right time. I was smart, strategic, and unbreakable. And every time they tried to bring me down with words or cold shoulders, I responded with results that spoke louder than their insults ever could. But beneath the surface, I knew some of them were planning their own moves. The ones who felt threatened weren't going to back down quietly. I was ready for whatever came next, but I also knew this was far from over. The tension didn't just simmer, it exploded. A week after I showed them who really held the power, my sister called a family meeting. I walked in expecting another round of sneers or thinly veiled insults. Instead, the room was charged with something different, fear mixed with desperation. She tried to act confident, but her voice cracked when she said, "We need to talk about how things have changed, about your position in the company." I sat back, letting her struggle, knowing she had no clue how deep my influence went. "Go on," I said, smiling quietly. She stumbled over words, trying to negotiate her place, but it was clear she was trying to buy time. Then my cousin, the loudest skeptic at every family gathering, chimed in. "You can't just boss us around. We've been here longer." I leaned forward, locking eyes with them all. Longer means nothing without control. You've been working for me this whole time and didn't even realize it. Now, it's time you understand what that means. I watched their faces drain of color as I revealed that I had quietly acquired the rights to several key projects that could make or break the entire company's future. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then came the shocker. They thought I was struggling, but I had been quietly buying shares, gaining allies in the boardroom, and building alliances. The family members who mocked me for years were now scrambling to secure their futures under my growing empire. My sister's voice trembled as she asked, "Why didn't you tell us?" I smiled. "Because I wanted to see who believed in me when I was nothing. and now you all see what I've become. The power shift wasn't just financial, it was personal. I wasn't just the underdog anymore. I was the one writing the rules. But as I watched their defeated expressions, I knew this wasn't the end. Some of them were already planning their comeback, their revenge, and I had to be ready. Because in this game, trust was a weapon, and betrayal was always just a step away.